Thank you. I hope you can all see me above this little pulpit here. Okay, friends and comrades, good morning. It's really an honor and privilege to be a panelist at this morning's public seminar held to honor one of South Africa's, indeed one of Africa's most powerful revolutionaries, both in thought and action, namely Steve Bantu Biko. It is fitting that we do this as a State of the Nation reflection, and in doing so, measure the extent to which the quest for a true humanity, which drove Steve and the Black consciousness movement that he founded, has been realized, if at all, in our country. Writing on Black consciousness and the quest for a true humanity for the book Black Theology, The South African Voice, sometime between 1997 and 1972, Steve said, "We have set out on a quest for true humanity, and somewhere on the distant horizon, we can see the glittering prize. Let us march forth with courage and determination, drawing strength from our common plight and our brotherhood." I suppose in this day and age, we would talk about personhood. However, to continue, Steve goes on to say, "In time, we shall be in a position to bestow upon South Africa the greatest gift possible, a more human face." It is clear then that the glittering prize that pervaded Stream's revolutionary dreams and imaginings was a South Africa with a more human face. These phrases, glittering prize, the distant horizon, a more human face, are poetic, metaphors for a radically different South Africa where race and class subjugation and exploitation of Black people would have no place, where Black people would have come into their own psychically, psychologically, and physically, free to define their own political, social, and economic destiny. And I think that's an important statement to make, given the negotiations. I think the question arises, did we really, as Black people, define our own destiny? Were we coerced into it? Were we opportunistic? And so on. While the situation of Black people is central to Black consciousness, it is also clear that the South Africa with a more human face includes all South Africa's peoples, irrespective of color. However, speaking from an analysis of Black people's historical condition, as it persisted then into the 1970s, Steve asserted that the problem, or the thesis, was strong white racism, to which the antithesis had to be a strong solidarity amongst Black people on whom white racism sought to prey. The synthesis of balance as he saw it was a true humanity where power politics would have no place. This position rejected the notion that the problem was apartheid and the antithesis a prescriptive non-racialism into which Blacks would be accommodated and assimilated and exploited in a system informed primarily by white values and needs. In another article entitled White Racism and Black Consciousness, the South Africa with a more human face is fleshed out when Steve states that the stress placed on the values of human relationships by Black people had to be restored, as well as the high regard for people, their property, and life in general. And I think this has a great pertinence today, given the kind of disregard that we see in relation to the majority of Black people in the country. He also cited the need to reduce the material element that was slowly creeping into the African character. These are prophetic words indeed, given the crass materialism that seems to be grabbing and pervading our own Black communities. I have gone on at some length to understand and delineate the features of this glittering prize, the South Africa with a more human face that Steve spoke about, in order to address the question, is there a glittering prize on the horizon? This question is somewhat whimsical. I think because we are now citizens of a new South Africa, purportedly equal citizens, whether black or white, in terms of our much vaunted Constitution with its Bill of Rights, setting out a range of human rights to which we are all entitled. Many would say that these documents and the institutions to uphold these rights sketch out the human face of South Africa that Steve and the Black Consciousness movement espoused. In fact, the Constitution moves beyond racial discrimination in its setting out of discrimination and consequently oppression on the basis of a number of other grounds such as sex, sexual orientation, gender, and so on. This would imply that our experiences of race and class subjugation have made us sensitive about other forms of discrimination which essentially denied human beings their humanity. And at the heart of a South Africa with a more human face is the recognition of and respect for the essential humanity, the humaneness of every human being, observable in how their country, fellow South Africans, government, and its institutions recognizes this. But again, we come back to the question, is there a glittering prize on the distant horizon? Quite clearly, this question is a rhetorical one and quells the idea that the new dispensation ushered in the South Africa with a more human face. South Africa remains, despite its new clothes, an essentially white capitalist patriarchal state. Perhaps the mistake many have made is to assume that the post-1994 negotiations ended the liberation struggle. Worse still, it seems that the glittering prize has been translated literally to mean self-enrichment and aggrandizement, as so many of our enterprising tenderpreneurs are excelling at. I think we are all aware that our country does have a reputation for being one of the most unequal societies in the world. We are bedeviled by unemployment, corruption, lack of proper housing, endemic violence against women, and abuse of children, lack of education infrastructure. These are just a few of the many things that we lack in this country. The gap between the rich and the poor has grown exponentially, and clearly our reconciliation processes have not really dealt with the deep-seated traumas of our racist past. So if we accept that these are signs that we have not really attained a fully human South African face, and that this is something we shall have to continue striving for, then yes, there is a glittering prize, but it remains there on that distant horizon. We have not acquired, we have not obtained that glittering prize right now. It is clear that envisioning the glittering prize on the distant horizon speaks to Steve's realization that the quest for true humanity, not only in South Africa, but the world over, is a difficult one. The horizon moves ever forward every time you move towards it. Many of us have grown old and even cynical at times about the way things have panned out in this country. However, there still remains in us the belief that society can be changed radically for the better. We talk about isms in relation to this. We talk about socialism. We talk about feminism, and so on. We get together and still talk about speaking power to truth. I'm not sure why we don't speak about revolution, because we certainly need to do so. I think many of us believe that a better world is possible, not because, as well-known feminist Bell Hooks says, we cling to utopian fantasies, but because we have struggled, many of us, most of our lives, to create an egalitarian, non-exploitative, anti-racist, anti-classist, anti-xenophobic, anti-homophobic, anti-sexist world. We cannot believe that such a world, we cannot stop believing that such a world is possible and attainable, even if not in our lifetime. Thank you.